Well, I am Mark Lagon, president of Freedom House, and it's really a pleasure to see all of you. Many of you are friends and colleagues. It's really a pleasure to share with you the first of many events that we're going to have marking Freedom House's 75th anniversary. I want to offer some very special thanks to the museum and especially its president, Jeff Herbst, who are allowing us to have this take place here in the Knight Conference Center. It's a very special place for doing such an event. It's an honor to me personally to be here because we're in the presence of people I consider, simply put, heroes. Heroes in the cause of freedom, of human rights, and democracy. Martin Lee, Benny Tai, and Joshua Wong. They embody our 75 years of work as well as a vital future for Freedom House. For 75 years, Freedom House has supported countless heroes, the men and women, many of them unheralded, wanting, demanding, and many times securing the fundamental rights that belong to us all. Whatever one-party states, dictators, or corrupt governments may say, all of us have these rights. Martin Lee, the founder and former leader of Hong Kong's Democratic Party, Martin has relentlessly championed civil liberties and direct elections in Hong Kong. Benny Tai, a law professor at the University of Hong Kong, Benny began the Occupy Central with Love and Peace campaign, the movement that 1 year ago began to exert pressure on the Chinese government officials to allow equal and universal suffrage in Hong Kong. And last but not least, Joshua Wong. One of Benny Tai's students, Joshua, is the person who put canary yellow umbrellas in the hands of tens of thousands of protesters, thus the umbrella revolution, which isn't over. He's part of a new, younger generation of leaders reminding us that individuals and groups that come together almost spontaneously can help show the way forward to democracy. We're thrilled to have 3 generations of democracy leaders here as our guests. I'd like to introduce another special guest, Indira Lakshmanan, as a leading journalist, a former Hong Kong bureau chief for the Boston Globe, a former foreign policy correspondent for Bloomberg News, to lead a conversation with Martin, Benny, and Joshua. If you might come up.
I am just thrilled to be here and to be part of this incredible event, historic not only for Freedom House's 75th anniversary, but also we're coming up on the 1-year anniversary of the Umbrella Movement, and also coinciding with Chinese leader Xi Jinping's visit to Washington, to the White House, the Rose Garden, a state visit with a black tie dinner, very different from our gathering here tonight. But so many of the issues that we're going to be talking about, we hope, are going to be issues that will be on the agenda for the President Obama and President Xi Jinping. So I want to just start out historically a little bit. I was lucky enough, as Mark said, to have been based in Hong Kong as the Hong Kong bureau chief for the Boston Globe, and to have gotten to cover the handover of Hong Kong going back to China's sovereignty in 1997. And I got to observe the first 7 years of what Hong Kong was like after that handover, but not having been there since, I would love to hear from the 3 of you, Hong Kong citizens, how you think Hong Kong has changed in terms of its rights and freedoms. Martin will remember that at the time he was telling me and other journalists he had a certain prognostication of what was to come, and I'd love to hear 20 years later, has that come to pass? How do you think Hong Kong is under Chinese rule 18 years later?
First of all, may I congratulate Freedom House in picking Hong Kong as your focal point in your celebrations of your 75th anniversary. Whoever made that decision has great foresight. Why Hong Kong, where people are still free? when so many people in the rest of the world are not? The answer is very simple. If you allow freedoms in Hong Kong, which are guaranteed under the Sino-British Joint Declaration and our Constitution, the Basic Law, to erode, how can you expect China's people, the Chinese people in mainland China, ever to have their human rights respected by their rulers? So this ties Hong Kong in. Unfortunately, your government doesn't seem to know that. And they say, Hong Kong, what's so important? Why should we care about Hong Kong when there's so many other major problems that we confront concerning China? And then I ask, what good does it do if as a result of the summit meeting soon, there are agreements to be entered solemnly between the two governments? What good are these agreements if another agreement over the future of Hong Kong were to be broken constantly? And hence the importance of Hong Kong in the context of China. And I wish your president, President Obama, would also put Hong Kong in the same focus that you, the Freedom House, have put Hong Kong in. So we thank Freedom House again for inviting us and for feeding us so well. But I entered into politics with one object in mind, and that is to try to contribute to Hong Kong from my experience in the law and as chairman of the bar at the time, to make sure as much as possible that the human rights of our people will continue to be enjoyed by Hong Kong people under the rule of law. But when I was 51 years of age, the Tiananmen Square massacre took place. And that, if anything, strengthened my resolve. Because why should Hong Kong people only have freedoms and the rest of China, and the people in the rest of China do not have freedom? So at the age of 51, I was fully committed to not just the rule of law, but to human rights. Not only for the people of Hong Kong, but for the people of China. And now you have 3 generations. So if I'm the grandfather of democracy, Benny is the father of democracy, and this is democracy.
So Benny, maybe you could tell us a little bit about whether you think there has been an erosion of rule of law, an erosion of core values or press freedom. I mean, we certainly still think of Hong Kong compared to the rest of China as a shining beacon. How true is that for those who are living there?
Yeah, before answering the question again, I have to kind of say something about that. I'm very grateful to the Freedom House for arranging this event and allowing the 3 of us here in the same platform to talk about Hong Kong's democracy. Actually, we haven't been in this kind of any platform or forum that the 3 of us appear at the same time. So that actually is historical. It's not just not just in States, also in Hong Kong. We haven't been together in a way to witness Hong Kong's democratic movement. Now, the 3 of us, I think it's the 3 of us together can be kind of the witnesses of Hong Kong's democracy or Hong Kong's democratic development. That when Martin kind of started leading the democratic movement in Hong Kong in the mid-80s of the last century we're talking about. You can be very young, I think, Martin. You can I was Martin's assistant. I was working for Martin. And then when I organized the Occupy Central And when I announced the beginning of the occupation, and actually Martin mentioned that he was 51 at the time organizing the June 4th march, that I was 51 also at the time when I announced the Occupy Central. And later, Joshua will tell you something more about his 51. Actually, that is, the three generations actually witness the beginning, the continuation, as well as the future of Hong Kong's democracy. And that also demonstrates that Hong Kong people are very determined to continue to fight for democracy until we can have democracy. Now, yes, we can see in the past few years, we do see the erosion about freedom of press, about the rule of law, and that's why we need to continue to fight for democracy. And I'm also a researcher in the rule of law, and I think it's very, very important to have democracy in order that we can maintain the rule of law of Hong Kong. And I actually also see that if China wants to have rule of law, and China claims that, they also want to have rule of law, but the kind of rule of law they are talking about is just, in the rule of law theories, we call them just the rule by law rather than really rule of law. So I think the same thing that what happens here in Hong Kong, we believe will happen in China. And we hope that China will be a state of rule of law as well as a democratic state. But it's important that to recognize the importance of Hong Kong to the development of China. So I think the fight for democracy, the fight to maintain rule of law in Hong Kong is not just merely for the sake of Hong Kong people. I think it's for the whole Chinese nation.
Well, you raised the whole Chinese nation, and I'm struck by the fact that China has a really rich history of student-led movements. And if we look from, May 4th in the early 20th century to June 4th in the late 20th century, there's a whole string of movements that have been led by young people in China, which have come to good or sometimes quite bad ends. And I'm struck, Joshua, by how at only the age of 17, you were really leading this student movement that became a movement throughout all of Hong Kong. And at your height of your movement, how many hundreds of thousands of people were there?
200,000.
200,000. Okay, so that's a pretty amazing feat for a 17-year-old. How did you get your start as a democracy protester and activist?
Actually, I'm just 18 years old student studying in Open University of Hong Kong, major in politics and public administration. Of course, I've involved and lead the umbrella movement while I'm 17 years old. But actually, the starting point for myself to involve in student movement is the age of 14, while I am the first year of the high school student. In 2011, around 4 years ago, Hong Kong government tried to introduce the national education subject for all of the primary school and secondary school students. It say that the Hong Kong government hope to force all of the students to embrace Communist Party, and they need to not only love the nation, but also love the Communist Party. And I tried to found the student activist group named Schorism. In 2011, we tried to organize different protests, demonstration, rally, or try to learn how to organize the press conference or the campaign, just like the politician or the NGO workers. And in 2012, because one of the teaching material is released by the Hong Kong government, it say that the Chinese Communist Party is selfless, united, and progressive. Suddenly, it's really the motivation to encourage a lot of parents, teachers, and students join into the movement. And in 2012, while I'm just 15 years old, we have organized the 90,000 people rally, the high school student hunger strike. I think only Hong Kong will have high school student involved in hunger strike. And later on, we have 120,000 people occupy outside of the government headquarters named Citizen Square and successfully forced the government to put aside the subject. And the first movement that I led is in 2012 while I'm just 15 years old. And later on, we involved in the political reform discussion. Other than hope to reject or anti some of the policy that announced by government, we also hope to fight for the future of Hong Kong. And we hope to fight for universal suffrage and direct election because in last year, August, the NPC of the Communist Party say that only who support Communist Party could be the chief executive candidate in the future. And we try to organize the student strike. And later on in last year, 28th of September, it suddenly, because of the 87 tear gas and the pepper spray and how the policemen use violence in Hong Kong, we occupy 3 districts. Of course, at the age of 17 to lead the umbrella movement is out of my expectation. Suddenly become the cover of Times or report by other foreign media, even on the street is recognized by the supporters. Is really quite tired for a university student or exhausted. But I still think that what I done is really meaningful because the foundation for China to have better human rights or even achieve democracy is, of course, first to let Hong Kong to have universal suffrage. That's why we fight for universal suffrage or political reform in Hong Kong. It's not just for Hong Kong, but also for China. And as mentioned by Martin and Benny, while and 51 years old of Martin led the movement in 1989 of the June 4th event march. And in last year, while Benny is 51 years old, he led the Occupy movement. Now I'm 18 years old. The Joint Declaration in the 1984 say that Hong Kong will have one country, two system, rule of law, separation of power from 1997 to 2047. And in 2047, I'm 51 years old. Yeah. And for my generation, what we worry about is after 2047, because the Joint Declaration haven't told us that what will be the future of Hong Kong after 32 years. Will Hong Kong still have rule of law? Will Hong Kong still have the separation of power? So I think while I'm 51 years old, I hope that I can still stand on the front line to fight for the freedom, democracy, and a core value for Hong Kong and China. This is what I hope. And of course, it is really a long road for us because after the umbrella movement, we still need to prepare on how to fight for the democracy and autonomy in Hong Kong. But anyway, we will...
Real troublemaker it is.
I totally disagree with Joshua that when he is to be 51, we should not be fighting for democracy.
Yeah, right.
We should be practicing democracy.
I hope so, yeah.
And he should not be just a street fighter. He should be the chief executive of Hong Kong at that time. So I disagree totally with him in the prediction about what will happen at the time when he is 51.
Yeah, but yeah, anyway, my attitude is prepare for the worst with the optimistic mindset, to fight for the future of Hong Kong, to fight for the new generation. Yeah.
Well, I want to come back to that question of what is going to happen to Hong Kong at the end of the 50-year period. And I also want to come back to the personal price that you have paid for your activism and the criminal charges that you're currently facing. But first, I want to sort of take a step back to a year ago when the umbrella movement began. And maybe Martin can sort of, since we're a mixed audience, not everyone here is a Hong Kong expert, maybe you can give people the bird's eye view of what it was that prompted that fight. And what is the universal suffrage that you're fighting for versus what is actually being offered in Hong Kong?
Well, this movement came about because of a rotten decision by the Standing Committee of the National People's Congress made on the 31st of August last year. Because for years we've been waiting for democracy to come to Hong Kong as it was promised to us in our mini constitution, the Basic Law. And twice it was delayed by Beijing, each time for 5 years. But finally, we were told we would be able to elect our chief executive by universal suffrage in 2017. But that decision, if carried out, or if turned into law in Hong Kong, would have meant that in 2017, the Hong Kong people would indeed be able to vote at an election of the chief executive, one person, one vote. But all the candidates will be handpicked by Beijing.
This has been compared in this country to being told you can marry whoever you want as long as it's on this list of approved spouses.
Yeah. So it's like Iran, isn't it? The 4 Ayatollahs. So that is what caused the Hong Kong people, particularly Benny, has been waiting for all these years. And he said, my hair is growing white and also disappearing. And his children are growing up, they're teenagers. And Benny said, well, maybe my teenage children will not even see democracy. So he said, okay, let's do something rather than wait. And hence this movement.
And not only that, but also the question of having a selection committee versus direct universal suffrage.
Yeah.
I mean, that's been so much of the fight.
Yeah.
So Benny, tell me, when the umbrella movement started, give us some of the drama. How did it play out? I understand that Martin was actually tear gassed, which is sort of hard for people to understand because he's such a figure in Hong Kong politics.
I was the first to get it, actually.
Yeah, right.
The first to get tear gassed?
Listen, Mike, I was telling the people to be calm. And the policemen are not our enemies but our friends. They were really doing their duty. And then they threw a tear gas at me.
Actually, the whole thing started by Joshua, that he jumped into the civic square. That's the government, the public square, actually outside the government office. In the past, that was open to the public, but that was closed then, and so they want to recapture the civic square, and so they jump and then started the whole thing, and
He got arrested right away.
and then arrested, circled by the police, and got arrested. And now our original plan of the occupation was actually on the 3rd of October, and we planned it in a very conservative way, and we just planned to have 10,000 people there. But then when they kind of being circled by the police and arrested by police, now we could not wait, and we have to join with them and support them. So we announced the early start of the Occupy Central. Then the police started to block the roads of access to the area outside the government headquarters where we stationed. Now, at that time, we might have only a few thousand people around there. But when the police blocked it, actually the people want to join us. So when the police blocked the access to that part outside the government headquarters, the people just continued to come, and there's so many people. They just walk into the very busy. Actually, the main road, the Harcourt Road, is the busiest road in Hong Kong, and I was there looking at the scene when the people walk into that busy road. I was just like, it's like Moses walked into the Red Sea. It's just open. So I think that's, to me, up to this point, I would see it as most the kind of time that I can remember. Then surely because there are so many people there in the street, the police cannot find ways to cause them to leave, and so they fired the tear gas. And again, that's something that hurt everyone in Hong Kong. I have after the occupation, that I have more time to talk with people about their experiences during the occupation, and a lot of them, they came out. They may not have interest or cared about politics or democracy that much in the past, but I think the tear gas change, and that's the kind of change in the Hong Kong society now, that people are very clear now what they want, because they see that a government that is not democratic, they will fire tear gas at their own people. No, but
Well,
I
you
know,
know,
some
it's-
democratic government will also fire tear gas.
That's right. I mean, you know, you make a point. I mean, Hong Kong people have long been caricatured as caring only about money and business and not really caring about democratic values, that it's just about getting ahead. And what we saw in the umbrella movement was that the government kept predicting that sentiment was going to turn against you all because people needed to get to work. They were being blocked by the protesters. Eventually, you guys were hunger striking. You were camped out, sleeping on the street. But sentiment didn't really turn against you for quite some time. In fact, you drew even more people to your movement.
No, actually, the traffic wasn't that bad. It's like almost Washington
It's like the
today.
Pope.
It's like
like
today.
Okay. So, Joshua, I wonder, what do you, I mean, you have only ever really lived as a sentient being in Hong Kong under Chinese rule. What do you think changed in that moment, in that key period of the umbrella movement? What did you see in your fellow Hong Kongers that gives you hope?
Yeah. I born in 1996, and while I'm 1 year old, Hong Kong is suddenly being handed over back to mainland China. And while I'm a primary school student and secondary school student, I try to read the book to know what is happening.
But Joshua,
in the
why
past.
didn't you protest then at the age of 1?
Okay, yeah, I don't know how to answer a question, but I would like to say for the new generation of Hong Kong people, it's quite different. For the old generation, while they saw the Joint Declaration or while after the June 4th event happened, most of them try to move overseas or leave Hong Kong, but because they do not really think that they are part of Hong Kong. But for the new generation, especially the high school student or the university student nowadays, they really think that their home is Hong Kong and they love Hong Kong, this city. And because they have the Hong Kong identity and they hope to contribute to let the home be better to achieve democracy and autonomy. A lot of people may say that Hong Kong people just care about money, money, and money. But I would like to say is for the last generation, the turning point would be the June 4th event to let them not only just fight for rule of law, but also fight for democracy and fight for human rights. I think the turning point of my generation is the umbrella movement. Of course, Hong Kong, we still can't achieve democracy in this moment. But after the umbrella movement, it really awakened a lot of the secondary school or high school students. I think the fact is not only, of course, I'm stand on the front line and being recognized by local or even foreign media. But a lot of student activists, while they are 14 years old only, they are the first year for them to be a secondary school student. They're already involved in a student strike. I can't imagine other countries will have secondary school student, 14 years old kid will involved in a student strike. Yeah, and 15 years old will involved in the civil disobedience or even some of the direct action being arrested. So I would like to say is, of course, we need to admit that last year is unfortunately we still can't force the China government to have any political reform, but for the new generation have changed their mindset already, and we would commit to fight for democracy until we get it.
So you've achieved a change in mindset, but as you yourself acknowledge, you have not achieved what you set out to accomplish. And I was struck by some of the press that I have read about the movement. There's a piece here from Foreign Policy called "What Happened to Hong Kong's Pro-Democracy Movement," that criticizes the movement, calls it a failure, and says, after all, the strike did not achieve its stated goals of toppling the chief executive C.Y. Leung or jettisoning the electoral system in which only 1,600 business and trade groups chose him. In fact, the campaign won no material concessions. Martin, I'd like you to respond to that.
I mean, if you look at history, how many examples are there that when people protest for something which is honorable, which is good, that they will actually get it right away? The fire of democracy is now burning in the hearts of all our young people. And that fire cannot be quenched by an iron fist. Democracy, therefore, will come to Hong Kong. I'm sure of that. Now, and when that day comes, And you look back, I think everybody will agree that the umbrella movement was the most important milestone in our fight for democracy. There's no doubt at all in my mind that it is a success. And we don't see it yet, but it will come about.
Joshua, what do you say to those critics of the student movement itself? I mean, that includes some young people. Some of the universities have pulled out of the larger umbrella group. And some of them say that government opponents need to act more like Malcolm X and less like Martin Luther King Jr. What do you say to that?
Actually, it's quite normal, from my point of view, I think it's quite normal for different activists to have different opinion. Of course, even me, Benny or Martin, we will have different strategy on fight for democracy. Just like I may be the student activist, I will involve more of the direct action, and Benny will hope to show the importance of civil disobedience, and Martin actually always supports us being a lawyer to have those of the activists being arrested. Yeah, so actually what I think is everyone have different role. Of course, in Hong Kong, we have the discussion that it is necessary for us to more be Malcolm X or not, but it's really the minority. Most of the Hong Kong citizens and the activists in Hong Kong, we still believe to persist on the peace and non-violence action. And I think it's quite normal. It's not really a problem because we still have the common goal to achieve democracy and autonomy.
Benny, let me ask you, since we have the Chinese president in town now, he's going to be meeting with Obama. As you yourself said, they're definitely going to be prioritizing other issues like cybersecurity and trade and, you know, a number of things, climate change. If you were a fly on that wall, or if you were an advisor to President Obama, what would you tell him that he should be bringing up in his discussions with President Xi? And should there be some sort of Hong Kong policy that the United States has?
Well, I think it's in the importance of Hong Kong, I think is related with the importance of China to the relationship or to the cause of the United States. I would say that if the United States see a democratic China important, not just I think China is not just important to the United States as a business partner or more business. It's also, I think, the cause of the United States to see that China to be a democratic China. Now then, that's the importance of Hong Kong. That for China to be a democratic China, and Hong Kong will be the first place, I think, in the whole China to be democratic. And Hong Kong will be the best place for China to experiment all this kind of electoral reforms. And so I would advise President Obama, if he has any chance to talk with President Xi, that to emphasize again and again that a democratic China is not just important to the United States, maybe emphasizing democracy, but to China also. That is important to China, even important to the communist regime. I think the communist regime is now also encountering her own legitimacy crisis within China. That how to sustain and maintain a stable government, a stable economy, that the communist regime must also deal with her own legitimacy crisis. And I'm not saying that China should now introduce immediately electoral reforms. I'm just saying that China should at least consider this possibility that in the future they may have to introduce some kind of electoral reform. But in order to prepare for that, to allow Hong Kong to have the democratic reform, that will provide China all this kind of opportunity to observe how directly how an electoral democratic system operates. Now that will be in the interest not just for the United States, for the world, and also for the communist regime.
So ironically,
Benny just gave a lecture on that. Now, I would say to President Obama, you must take presidency seriously. When he said that he has this great China dream, now I know when he said that, a lot of people will just brush him off. What you talking about great China dream? Particularly when he says it also includes democracy and human rights. So a lot of people will just write him off. But don't. Take him seriously. Take him on his word. And say, now, presidency, I'm happy about your great China dream. But how do you realize that dream if Hong Kong's democracy, which is already promised to them, cannot be practiced?
so challenging the Chinese president to
Take him on his word.
use democratic reform as a way to actually sustain his own leadership or his own party's leadership.
Exactly.
A strange thought to think of democratic reform as a way to sustain the Communist Party.
Yeah, but he will be happy because you take him seriously.
I was asked to incorporate some questions from the audience, and I was given this question, which I think any of you could take, which is, what can Taiwan learn from Hong Kong's experience?
Well, that's simple, isn't it? As long as we are not being given a high degree of autonomy as promised, and as long as we cannot be masters of our own house as promised, the Taiwan people say, do you want us to be reunited with you? And then it took us so many years to get democracy. So until you get democracy in mainland China, please don't bother us with this temptation.
Joshua, I don't want to end our discussion without talking about your own situation, because it is quite troubling. You've actually got some very serious criminal charges pending against you right now, and you are supposed to be going before the court next month, I believe.
Yeah.
Tell us about that, and then also I have to ask you, you're only 18. Do you still live at home with your parents? And
Okay.
what do your parents think about all this?
Now I receive 3 charges because last year in the 26th of September, because I've used the microphone to shout that, hey, let us go into the Citizen Square, get back the public area. And while I announced this statement and climbed through the 3 meters barrier, I've been arrested suddenly. And the result is 3 charges now. One is the inciting unauthorized assembly. The second one is contempt of court. And the third one is obstruct the police officer. And in the next month, 26th of October, I need to go to the court. Of course, at this moment, I can't still make a judgment that whether I will be in prison or jail in the next year or not. But yeah.
What is the maximum number of charges you could serve, and is Martin going to be your lawyer to make sure you don't go to prison?
But the first one is
No, we want him to be in prison.
What?
Yeah, you should also go to prison with
We want
me.
him to be in prison so that will be more people joining the movement.
Oh my God.
You say that in jest, but I can't believe that's actually true.
No. Maximum inciting unauthorized assembly, maximum need to be in prison for 3 years.
3 years.
And
3 years if convicted by magistrate, 5 years if convicted by district judge.
So do you think they're doing this to kill the monkey, to scare the chicken, or kill the chicken to scare the monkey? Is that what this is about?
Yeah,
Or are they just trying to scare you to get you to back off of this movement? Do you think they're really going to imprison you?
Of course, they hope to give me the pressure and burden. But before organize the movement, I already expect that I need to pay the price, because under the current situation, we are facing Communist Party. Compared to the activists in mainland China, we are already lucky. Yeah, but talk about what is my situation. Of course, being an 18 years old university student, being recognized on the street, and always accept the media interview. Last year, during the Umbrella movement, my home address, my mom, and my mobile number is being public in the internet, and some of the pro-Beijing people send a letter to my home, and my mom need to change her mobile number because there's a lot of the junk call. Actually, not only myself, whole of my family received the pressure, but it's really lucky that my parents really support me. From 2011, 14 years old, to found scholarism till now 18 years old in 2015, they haven't suggest me not to involve in social movement in the future. Yeah, they just say that do what you want because you can decide your future. Yeah, so of course I think it's really important to thank my parents. Yeah.
Well, we hope that you're not only deciding your own future, but that you will be helping to influence the future of democracy in Hong Kong.
By going to prison.
No, hopefully not, hopefully not. And I have to say that all 3 generations of Hong Kong democracy leaders are a real inspiration to all of us, and I thank you so much for sharing your stories with us today.
Thank you.